Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
Welcome, everybody. If you want to learn how to explain and defend the faith with clarity and charity, you come to the right place. Welcome to Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. I'm Gary Michuta, and we're here to talk about defending, explaining the faith. And we've got a great program in store for you today. Coming back to the dojo, our good friend, Kenneth Hensley, who is a convert and also a top-notch Catholic apologist, especially focuses in the area not only Protestantism, because he's a convert, he used to be a Baptist minister, but also he's very good with apologetics for non-believers, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to be talking about, I guess if you want to give a title to the program, how to evangelize those who doubt or deny the existence of God. So that's what we're going to talk about with Kenneth Hensley on the other side of the break. And also, we have our exercises, as always, training our minds so that we'll be able to spot fuzzy thinking and also learn more about the faith. So we have our Finding the Fallacy for today, which is, and it's a Latin term, folks, it's post hoc ergo propter hoc, which basically means after this, therefore because of this. Very frequent fallacy, and by the way, it's also one of those fallacies that brings about superstitious beliefs. So something we need to be aware of at all times. And also we're going to meet the early church father for today, who is Pope St. Leo the Great. So got a biggie in store for us. And as always, it's time for us to give our shout outs to those watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. Thanks for watching. And of course, thank you for listening to us on whatever radio station you're listening to or podcast. And I guess I should also mention that. Oh, by the way, hi everybody on live stream. Good to see some familiar names. And we had the explosion emojis, yes. Many of you have written to me and said, oh, I missed the show. I would have loved to hear what so-and-so had to say. Well, guess what? All you have to do is go to the Virgin Most Powerful's apologetic, or actually not apologetics, official website, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org. And you can go there and access all of our programs on Hands-On Apologetics, so you don't have to miss one. You can listen to it at your convenience. You can download it. You can share it. And by the way, please, talk about us. Share if you enjoy the programming here on Virgin Most Powerful. Share it, like it, pass it around. And because we've got lots of great information, lots of great guests, not only for my show, but all the shows that we have here. And let's see. Oh, you are also part of the program. And as always, you can give us a call. Maybe when Ken comes on the show, you might have a question about, some difficulties you're having discussing bringing non-believers to belief. Give us a call at 888-526-2151. That's 888-526-2151. And for those who maybe don't want to go on the air, or maybe you can't be on the air, maybe you're driving in your car, or you're dropping off the kids or something like that, but you really do have a question you'd like to ask, or maybe you want to share something that's going on in your life, maybe some advice you could give people, things that helped other people, or maybe some advice to not to. Sometimes the crash and burn stories are just as valuable. Send us an email at questions@handsonapologetics.com. That's questions@handsonapologetics, all one word.com. And that goes straight to the dojo mailbox. And as always with the dojo mailbox, I let it accumulate a little bit, so you need to be patient. But, sometimes I put it on the air, but I almost always respond. So you will get a response from me. At least, I try to make an effort to do that. And so if someone's email slips through the cracks, just please be patient, and I will get to them ASAP. All right, so let's see. Let's go to the Finding the Fallacy for today, Like I said, the fallacy is post hoc ergo propter hoc, which is Latin. It's a fancy Latin term, but basically it means after this, therefore because of this. You see, this fallacy kind of explains itself, doesn't it? It basically reasons that because something follows another thing, that somehow it is the cause of that thing. Okay. Now, if you think about it, it's actually kind of absurd because that doesn't always follow. For example, when a rooster crows at daybreak, the rooster crows, the sun rises. It's wrong for you to argue that because the sun rose after the rooster crowed, therefore the rooster crowed caused the sunrise. Okay, that's kind of an obvious example of how fallacious this can be. But the thing is that it's such a common experience that, a cause would precede its effect, that we often think that, something happened, then something followed it, therefore the first thing caused the second thing. But like I said, it doesn't always happen. Another thing too is, let's see, it rained last night and my sidewalks are wet. So therefore the rain caused my sidewalk to be wet. Well, that could be true, or it could be just as true that the rain evaporated and someone started a sprinkler. Okay, it doesn't necessarily follow, is the point. And like I said, this is one of those fallacies that gives rise to superstitious beliefs. For example, you ever hear the belief that if you walk underneath a ladder, something bad will happen? Or something will, if a black cat crosses your path, something bad will happen that day. Or maybe, find a penny, pick it up, all the day you'll have good luck. Where did they come from? Well, actually, it very well could have stemmed from the post hoc ergo propter hoc. Somebody was walking, a black cat crossed the path, and something bad happened later on in the day, so they reasoned, well, since something bad followed the black cat crossing the path, therefore the cat was the cause of the bad thing. Yes, so I'm sure you can think of numerous examples of various superstitious beliefs that most likely came about through this particular fallacy, the post hoc ergo propter hoc, or after this, therefore because of this fallacy. And that's our finding of the fallacy for today. So be aware, don't necessarily assume just because one thing follows another that first thing is the cause of the second. All right. Now let's jump to the Meet the Early Church Father today. And, every program we meet a new early church father. Today's church father is Pope St. Leo I, or also known as Leo the Great. He reigned as Pope from AD 440 to 461. He was probably a Tuscan by origin, but he considered himself a Roman. And he, under Pope Sixtus III and Celestine before him, Leo was the archdeacon in the Diocese of Rome and was an official mission in Gaul, where when he learned that Sixtus, the Pope, had died, and that he himself was chosen to succeed to the See of Peter. So he ran back to Rome and was consecrated September 29th, 440 AD. The date of his death is uncertain. We're not really sure when he died, except it's probably fairly late, perhaps 461 AD, but we can't be sure of it. He is also, this is interesting, folks, Pope St. Leo I is also the first pope who did not die a martyr's death. Now, this is 440 AD. So you can imagine the string of popes that died martyr's deaths beforehand. He was made a doctor of the church by Pope Benedict XIV in 1754. His reign as pope, he had a lot of things on his plate. You think things are bad today, you should hear him. I mean, first he had to deal with the invasions of the Vandals and the Huns. So you have invasions from without. You also had schisms and heresies from within. The chief of which is one heresy that we mentioned a number of times on this program. It's called Monophysitism, which believes that Christ did not have two natures, divine and human, but a kind of mixed together nature, a single was a theanthropic nature, kind of mixing of the two, which was very prominent in the church. And He also had to deal with what's called the Robber Council of Ephesus. In fact, he coined the term that this was a convention of robbers. Unfortunately, since you had the Robber Council in Ephesus, you needed another council to correct it. That council was the Council of Chalcedon in 451, and which was expected to repair the situation. And it did a very clear condemnation, not only of Monophysitism, that heresy about Christ having only one nature, but also another heresy known as Nestorianism, in which they so separate the divine and human within Jesus that they actually come up essentially with two persons. So that was another nasty heresy that Pope St. Leo the Great had to deal with. Unfortunately, Chalcedon, there was lots of misrepresentation in the East concerning this council, although Leo, of course, was quite orthodox on the point. Also, let's see, he dealt with a number of heresies, and also he wrote quite a bit. His literary remains are mostly in the form of letters and sermons, and they are better preserved than those of any other pope before him. And apparently, he kept the chancellery archives. So he may have been the first pope to actually have an archive where all his letters and sermons and so on were stored. And so that's another groundbreaking thing about Pope St. Leo I, is that it's from then on that we have much more complete records about papal decisions, letters, sermons, and the like. Fantastic Pope, and that's our Meet the Early Church Father for today, Pope St. Leo I, otherwise known as Leo the Great. Coming up on the other side of the break, we're going to be talking with Master Apologist Ken Hensley about how to talk to people who do not believe. Stay tuned, everybody.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet three men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. And before we get to our guest, I was reading the online chat room on YouTube, and they reminded me, and thank you very much, that this weekend is the movie Unplanned is coming out, which, according to Google, is about Abby Johnson, who becomes the youngest clinic director in the history of Planned Parenthood, and then a life-changing experience turns her into an anti-abortion activist. Highly recommend that you check out the film. Let's give it a boost in the box office and call people's attention to it. By the way, I always hate the way people change, their choice of language, because no one wants to be an anti-anything. Usually anti-somebody's are kind of viewed negative. I wish they would just call pro-lifers abolitionist. I mean, I think that's a nice way to put it, and I think it's also kind of fits with our intellectual lineage, if you will. Okay, so that's my 2 cents worth. But check it out. Unplanned is coming out in movie theaters near you. Now, without further ado, let's talk to our guest. Kenneth Hensley is the online resource and pastoral care coordinator for Coming Home Network. He has an MA in theology and was ordained a Protestant minister for 11 years before converting to the Catholic faith in 1997. He's taught at St. John Seminary in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles and has spoken at Catholic conferences and parishes throughout the U.S. and internationally. Ken has been on the staff with Coming Home Network for 3 years, and he and his wife Tina live in Fillmore, California. They have 2 kids and 8 grandkids. And Ken Hensley, welcome to Hands-On Apologetics.
Welcome, Gary. Good to be here again.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. You have a series of incredible articles on the Coming Home Network website titled "How I Evangelize Those Who Doubt and Deny the Existence of God." How did you come about with this series of articles?
Oh, well, these are the contents of the articles are things that I've been thinking about for 30, 40 years and chewing on and working on. And then back in 2009 or 10, something like that, Patrick Madrid contacted me and asked me if I would co-author a book with him on the subject, which I did, and we published a book called, on our Sunday Visitor, called, what is it called, Gary? The Godless Delusion.
That's right, Godless Delusion.
Delusion. And I wrote, quite a bit of that. And so, anyway, the ideas are ideas that have been, percolating for many, many, many years, and I wrote a series of blog articles for the Coming Home Network that are published on the site now, and this is what you're referring to.
Yeah, it's very good articles. And, I was just curious, with your background, last time I had you on, we talked a little bit about your journey of faith. How did interest in theistic apologetics, talking with non-believers, how did that come about? Because your background's more as a Baptist minister, right?
Well, it came about because although I had some what I would call spiritual experiences as a young man when I was 11, 12 years old, I drifted off quite far, and I would never have called myself an atheist, but I definitely lived in the secular world, and I thought that way, and I had friends who were atheists. In fact, I remember when I was about 21 years old, I was with a friend in my backyard, and we were digging a hole to plant a bush or something like that, and he said to me, "This is all we are, dirt. That's it." And when he said that, I looked up at him, and I remember I just thought for a second, and I said, "No, that can't be true." And so I didn't personally, have atheism as my worldview at any point in time, but from the time I became a Christian, apologetics was important to me in every way. C.S. Lewis's works like Mere Christianity and whatnot were some of the first books I ever read. And I was in a secular environment. I was a rock and roll musician, basically a nightclub musician. And so I was surrounded by a lot of people that don't believe. And I was interested from the very beginning to try and learn how to construct the arguments in my mind and how to persuade.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And
so the fact that I went on to become a Baptist minister and all that is this, is this part of my Christianity, but I still cared about all of it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, that explains, because I was usually, that's a whole different ball. It's a different ball game when you have to not appeal to positive revelation and just work through common sense and reason. And you're so adept at it. That's how I figured. There has to be some portion in your life that that you are rubbing elbows with a lot of non-believers.
Well, and we are now more than ever. With the popularity of the four horsemen, of the apocalypse. Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, and I can't remember the fourth one right now. But atheism is becoming more popular in a collapsing Western civilization. As Christendom is moving more and more in the direction of barbarianism again. Relativism has come in, atheism's come in, and many, many young people are attracted to it. So, it seems like more than ever we need to know how to talk to these people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So last time you were on the program, we kind of started laying down a foundation for believers to build upon, for themselves. And we started with Scripture, about what Scripture teaches about that humans are innately orientated to belief in God. And you want to maybe just quickly go over a few of those basic steps?
Yeah, let me launch from a different point, but let me summarize that and lay the foundation again.
Okay.
By talking about the concept of a recalcitrant fact, we will jokingly refer to a child that refuses to obey as a recalcitrant child, and I'm sure that you were not a recalcitrant child, Gary. Is that correct?
No, never. No,
never. Well, there's a book written by a Christian philosopher out here in Southern California that I like very much. His book's called The Recalcitrant Imago Dei, The Recalcitrant Image of God, Human Persons and the Failure of Naturalism. And it's a book that says a lot of the things that I say. And anyway, in the book, he explains that a recalcitrant fact is a fact that stubbornly refuses to be assimilated within one's worldview. If you will, it's an uncooperative fact. It's a fact that won't fit. It's a fact that resists explanation. And I guess a simple homey illustration might be that if your worldview is that O.J. didn't do it, okay, then the fact that his DNA shows up at the crime scene, on his car, at his home, and his wife's DNA is mixed in there as well, is a problem. It's a what we would call a recalcitrant fact. It's a fact that resists explanation within your worldview, which is that O.J. didn't do it. And therefore, it can serve as strong evidence that your worldview isn't true. Okay, and so I liken it to like an anvil in the throat. It's something that won't go down. And I can summarize my approach by saying that I think that the human person, the image of God, the Imago Dei, the image of God in the human person, is the recalcitrant fact that simply cannot be assimilated by a totally naturalist, materialist worldview.
Okay.
And in fact, I have a quotation from Dr. John Searle, who's an atheist philosopher of mind, in which he says, and I read this to you a month ago, but I'll read it again,
yes.
in which he says, again, an atheist philosopher, there's exactly one overriding question in contemporary philosophy. How do we fit in? How can we square the self-conception we have of ourselves as mindful, meaning-creating, free, rational agents? How do we square this with a universe, that is our conception of the universe, with a universe that consists entirely of mindless, meaningless, unfree, non-rational, brute physical particles? So this is how I summarize it. I mean, you mentioned Scripture, and so I'll go there just quickly too. But the Word of God teaches us that every person is made in the image and likeness of God. The Word of God teaches us that God's existence is clearly seen through the things that He's created, that in fact the heavens declare the glory of God and the skies proclaim the work of His hands, night after night pours forth speech. The Bible in Romans chapter 1 teaches us, in fact, that God's existence is clearly seen through the things which he has made, so that no one has an excuse for trying to suppress that knowledge. And so what I'm saying is that when I meet with someone who doesn't believe in God, I believe that I'm meeting with someone who lives in a universe created by God, who lives in a universe that cries out God's existence and evidences it in every way, and is, in fact, himself the most radical advertisement for the existence of God, because he is the image and likeness of God. So you have this kind of, I don't think ironic's the right word, but you have this situation where someone who literally is a mirror of God's own being and nature, the image and likeness of God, walking around the earth saying that God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You know, in one book that I read many years ago, the illustration was given. It's like, imagine two children in their backyard swinging on the swing set, and they can hear their father mowing the lawn. They can smell, hot dogs being cooked in the kitchen, and they're sitting on the swing set discussing whether or not a mother or father exist. It's just sort of it's a ludicrous situation. God's existence is clear. And so my point is that everyone knows at a deep level the God who created them, and I believe that that's true of atheists and agnostics as well. They can say there is no God, but I don't really believe it in the deepest level. And I think that their very nature is the recalcitrant fact that cannot be assimilated by their worldview. And so what I attempt to do in apologetics or evangelism really is just kind of remind them of who they are, remind them of the things that they believe in their heart of hearts, and try to show them how that who they are and what they believe just does not fit. It contradicts what they say is true about the universe in which we live.
Yes, yeah, very good. So not only do you show that the coherency of the belief in God, but you also explain why they have an anvil in their throat. Why their disbelief doesn't seem to fit experience.
Yeah, when I wrote that particular one, the blog article on that, I was searching all over to find a picture of Wile E. Coyote with an anvil in his throat, but I couldn't find it. I could find lots of them where he's falling off a cliff and an anvil's dragging him down, but that's the image I had in my mind. Yeah. And that's a good point that you raised there, is that not only are we able to describe the animal and the problem, but we're able to explain to them why they have it and why it is in their throat. It's because God does exist, and God created them. I mean, when you think about it, if it really were true that nature is all that exists, the material universe, and if it were really true that you and I were nothing more than evolved products of nature. Oh, sorry, what's happening here? Is that your phone?
Oh, that's okay. Well, you can finish that thought on the other side of the break.
Okay.
Talking with Ken Hensley.
Okay.
Stay tuned, everyone.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now are saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet three men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
We were chatting with Ken Hensley on how to explain the existence of God, the existence of true belief to non-believers. And Ken, right before the break came, you were right in the middle of a great thought about how the Christian worldview not only explains the coherence of its view, but also explains why atheists, like you said, we're trying to swallow this anvil. It's just the facts of our experience don't square with their belief system.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, we're going to get into an illustration of it in just a moment. So I'll just say that the point I was trying to make, or the point I was starting to make, was simply that if we really were nothing more than the natural products of a natural universe, then everything about us would be perfectly explainable in terms of nature. Everything. I mean, you would be like an apple hanging on a tree, and nothing out of whack.
Nothing mysterious about
and
that.
And yet we are completely out of whack. I mean, everybody jokes about it. Every Woody Allen movie that's ever been made is about how out of whack we seem to be in so many ways. We are not one with the universe. We're completely non-one. But anyway, I want to make one more point before we go to, I know we're going to talk about the problem of human worth in the time we have today, but I want to make one more point that I think is important as introductory, and that is that I do not conceive of most of what I'm saying here as a proof of the existence of God. There are rational, logical proofs for God's existence, but I don't think that this is a proof, the thing we're going to talk about today. I think that it is an argument, though. And, there is a difference. And when you tell your conversion story to someone, you're not making a proof. You're not offering a proof of God's existence, but you are making an argument. Just when you just talk about how you came to know Christ, you're making an argument. When you talk about how your life has been changed, you're making an argument. And so I view most of what I'm saying here as arguments, not as proofs, although a little bit later on, when we get into free will, and when we get into the issue of the laws of logic, that is, can a materialist universe, can it even account for the existence and the universality of the laws of logic, then I think we are moving into the realm of proof. Yeah. Because if you can't even justify your use of logic, then you can't prove anything. And I'm going to insist, in a future conversation, I'm going to insist that a materialist can't even justify their use of reason. But we'll get there. Okay?
Good. Yeah. Okay. Where do you start?
Well, we're talking about, I'm giving my first illustration then of this problem of the human person being a recalcitrant fact that doesn't fit really within the naturalist worldview. And I want to talk about the problem of human worth. Because, again, I've mentioned the fact that we all kind of know the God that created us, and we all have, in a way, we have God's word, God's law sort of written into our consciences, so that we know a lot of things. And I would say that the atheist knows many things and believes in many things that he cannot even begin to account for in terms of materialism. And one of them is the view that we have of human worth. Because it seems that we share pretty much a universal intuition and a strong belief in the value of human life. And I would say that some atheists, now I'm going to quote some that don't believe this, but most human beings walking around this earth, I'd say almost all of them, whether they call themselves atheists or agnostic, they still believe in the inherent value of the human person. They still believe in the high value of human life and of equal value of human life. And I'm going to suggest that none of that can be justified in terms of materialist worldview. None of it.
Huh. Well, that's so striking because it seems so obvious. It's like part of the air we breathe. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but
no, go ahead.
That's interesting. It's one of those facts that doesn't fit. Let's talk about that. Why doesn't it fit?
Well, what seems obvious? You said it seems obvious is like the air that we breathe. You mean that we have special value?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think if you talk to a non-believer would say, well, of course, everybody believes human beings have value, that there's dignity, we don't deny that.
No, yeah, and I don't, catch the rankest atheist on earth and watch them on the day when their first son or daughter is born and watch the way they act and the way they talk. It's so common. People talk about their children as priceless, their grandchildren. Oh, this little life is worth everything. We talk this way, and we feel this, and we believe this. And of course, once again, the Christian theistic worldview completely accounts for that.
Right.
It makes perfect sense within a Christian worldview because, again, God creates us. We are living souls, spiritual beings, not just blobs of protoplasm or biological machines or something like that. We're created by God in God's likeness, and we do possess special value. I think about Psalm 8, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. It goes on to say, you have created us, made us a little lower than the heavenly beings, crowned man with glory and honor. So as a Christian, the truth of our unique value and dignity as human persons is something that God has written into our hearts. It's something that we know. And so when we speak about that, we're speaking about something that we have a foundation for believing. But what I want to suggest, first of all, is that with an atheist has no foundation for talking about the value of human life. And I want to break it down into three. First of all, the inherent value of human life, and then the high value, and then the equal value. So first of all, inherent value. What grounds does a total materialist have for saying that human beings possess inherent value? That is a value that is intrinsic to them, that is inherent in them. Well, what grounds do they have for saying that? When they've already said, or when they've also said, that nothing exists in this universe but particles interacting with one another, and that you, Gary Machuda, are nothing more than a biological accident.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
If you're a biological accident, then where do you get this inherent value?
Yeah, you're nothing more than matter. So you're no different than anything else.
Yeah, and in fact, some atheists that want to be very consistent with their view will state this, and I have a couple of good quotations in my lesson here from Ingrid Newkirk, the president of PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, where she said once, animal liberationists do not separate out the human animal. A rat is a pig, is a dog, is a boy. They are all mammals.
Wow. So you definitely have a kind of a equaling of the playing field there. I mean, so a rat, a pig, a dog, and a boy are all mammals, and therefore there's really no distinction in terms of intrinsic value?
Well, that's, on an intellectual level, that's what they are forced to say. And I'm sure that, Ingrid Newkirk, if you really pressed her, she's saying this because it follows rationally from her atheist worldview. But if a building was on fire and there was a pig in the building and a dog and a boy and a rat, I'll bet you she'd run to save the boy still. I don't think she'd run in to save the rat. Which again is just more evidence that she kind of knows in her heart of hearts that her worldview is junk. That is not true.
Yeah, so in doing so, is she like being a speciesist? Is that right? Speciesist? That she'd prefer one species of mammal over another?
That's right. Consistent atheists will even push it so far as to say that for her to run into the building and save the child first is evidencing this speciesist, point of view, where it's irrational. It's irrational for her to take one species and to elevate it as being more valuable than other species, because everything is nothing. I mean, everything has just evolved up out of the soup. Everything is an accident. Some things are more complicated than other things, but none are better. In fact, I have a great quote here from James Rachels, another atheist philosopher. So I'm quoting only from atheists primarily. This is what he says. As Darwin clearly recognized, we are not entitled, not on evolutionary grounds at any rate, we are not entitled to regard our own adaptive behavior as better or higher than that of a cockroach, who, after all, is adapted equally well to life in its own environmental niche. In fact, I would say cockroaches are adapted even better than we are. They get along just fantastically as long as you're not spraying Raid on them.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they might survive a nuclear explosion, but maybe not a roach motel.
Yeah, we're walking along, sunk in our neuroses and psychoses, and we're having to go lay on the psychologist's couch constantly because we don't fit into the universe, because there's something wrong. And, of course, the Christian worldview explains that as well. But, when you read these quotations, though, a rat is a pig, is a dog, is a boy. We are all mammals. And we are not, we are not entitled to to speak of ourselves as being better or higher than a cockroach and all that. When you read this, though, and you really let these thoughts sink in, this is what one really has to accept as true if one really honestly believes that we live in a universe in which there is no God, no human souls, no spirits, nothing, just material facts.
Yeah, very good.
And so I think that they're being reasonable. They're being reasonable when they talk about speciesism and how we should think of all species as being equally valid and all that. And how some do that too. They'll flip over, they'll do backflips to save a worm. And then of course they vote for abortion all the way up to birth and after.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're coming up on the break. So they might say human beings are just really well-developed, evolutionary, things, but the difference is that it's still a thing, a thing amongst other things. So really all have equal value. Okay, well, hey, like I said, we're coming up on the break. On the other side of the break, why don't we dig down a little bit more onto this, how this innate understanding of human value really doesn't square with the materialist, naturalist view. Okay, Ken? All right, we're talking to Ken Hensley here at Hands On Apologetics. If you have any questions or comments, give us a call at 888-526-2151. Love to hear from you. There's more to come after the break. Stay tuned, everybody.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith because they're going to meet three men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites The Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. We were talking with Ken Hensley, actually on a series of articles they wrote that's available at the Coming Home Network website, and it's titled How I Evangelize Those Who Doubt and Deny the Existence of God. We're talking about the problem of human worth, human dignity. And we were just talking about speciesism. I guess that's hard to say that 3 times quickly without stopping.
Yeah.
Ken, not only does it seem like, this atheistic, naturalistic worldview flattens everything down to things, but it also, you read in the newspapers about these fights for animal rights, that, animals suddenly seem to have the same legal rights as human beings. It's a strange picture of reality.
I heard the other day that some people are fighting for robots to have rights, the same rights. So, yeah,
right.
Flattening everything down to things. So let me sort of summarize it like this. Human beings believe naturally because we are the image of God, because God has written these truths into our very souls. Human beings tend to believe in the inherent value of human life, the high value of human life, meaning that it has special value above that of other animals and created things, and the equal value of human life. And yet what I'm saying is, when you think about it rationally, none of that can be justified in terms of a materialist worldview. You can't justify the idea that we have inherent value any more than a dirt clod has inherent value, or a plum, or anything. You can't find any justification for saying that human beings have a special high value that is higher than other things. That's just speciesism. Why should we just declare that we have more value than other things because we wound up being more complicated? And then the third one is equal value, which can't even be justified. Now, this is something that, people fight for too. Atheists fight for equal value among human beings. And yet, can it be justified in terms of an atheist worldview? Again, I'd say no. And let me just sort of read something to you here that I wrote down, that atheist philosopher Joel Feinberg, he spent some time actually thinking about this exact issue from a naturalist perspective. And what he concluded was this: since people quite obviously have inequalities of merit, inequalities of gifting, of talent, ability, personality, character, inequalities in the contribution that they make to society and all that, why is it, he asked, that we seem to have this universal intuition and strong belief that each human being possesses equal value and should be treated with equal dignity? He goes, where does this come from? Why do we believe this, he says, and why do we strive to practice it? Well, the conclusion that he came to as an atheist was that however common this intuition and belief may be, there's no ground for it whatsoever in the natural world. It seems to be, he said, some kind of irrational and unjustifiable attitude that we share, a subjective feeling that everyone has value when in fact they don't. So I kind of summarize this. I'd like to sort of apply it in a second, but let me summarize it by saying, by asking the question, is there any way to escape this implication for the naturalist? Is there any way to escape this implication, this negative implication? Is there any way to justify an atheist thinking of human beings as though they possessed inherent, high, and equal value? And the answer is no. And it's not Ken Hensley saying it. Peter Singer, another very, very famous atheist, professor of bioethics at Princeton, he doesn't think there's any way for an atheist to justify this. In fact, he has admitted that the Judeo-Christian doctrine of man's unique creation in the image and likeness of God may be the only foundation that there is to support such an idea. That's what he says. The only foundation that may exist to support such an idea, that is the idea that human beings possess special, inherent, high, equal value, may be the Christian worldview and the doctrine that man is made in the image and likeness of God. And I want to read one more quotation quickly, because James Rachels, the atheist philosopher, agrees with him entirely. This is what he says. I'm quoting, "The traditional support for the idea of human dignity are gone. They have not survived the colossal shift of perspective brought about by Darwin's theory. A Darwinian," and he means by that an atheist Darwinian, so that we don't have to get off into evolution today, but he means a purely materialist atheist Darwinian, may conclude that a successful defense of human dignity is most unlikely. No way to support it, these atheists are admitting. There's no foundation to support this idea that human beings have special value, unless, of course, you reject a materialist atheist worldview and you step into a worldview that can make sense of that, like the Christian theistic worldview.
Yeah, so the Christian theistic worldview has explanatory power, where naturalism has no explanatory power ever. So which one's more likely true?
Yes. Well, like I said, this is not a proof at this point. If someone would say, "Oh, you're not proving anything." Well, I'm not proving anything, but I'm making a powerful argument. And in practice, it can come down to this. In practice, let's say you're talking to someone who says, "I don't think that God exists," or "I don't know," or "I don't really believe that there is a God." You could begin to probe this idea. Well, do you believe that human beings have value? And you can walk through this. And the point is, you can at least press this idea on a person that, if you really want to become consistent as an atheist, you're going to have to drop the idea that your 5-year-old daughter is special. You need to drop it. You need to drop this idea that she has some unique inherent value or worth, and you need to really just face the fact that she is worth nothing.
Yeah.
Now, subjectively, she may be worth something to you, but now we're talking in pure subjective terms. But objectively, she's worth nothing. She's just an accident of nature. She has no high value. She's not any more valuable than a cockroach. And that's the kind of thing that will bother a human being, when they're forced to face this and to think this way and to realize that if they really want to be true and consistent, they're going to have to move in this direction. And that's why it can have evangelistic power. Go ahead, though. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was, if you don't believe this is true, listen to the conversion story of Jennifer Fulwiler, folks, where, when she's holding her newborn baby, she was trying to say, "I'm holding nothing but, this bag of, highly evolved molecules that are really nothing more than the physical." And that was like one of the first cracks in her atheism, was she realized that this very real experience that she has innately with her own child didn't fit her worldview.
No, that's a beautiful, perfect illustration of this very lesson that we're talking about here. Yeah, it's exactly true. And when I read quotations from atheists, there's one from Francis Crick in his book, The Astonishing Hypothesis, where he says, the astonishing hypothesis, I'm sort of paraphrasing now, is the astonishing hypothesis is that your thoughts, your ideas, your sense of personal worth, your this, your that, and your morals, all of it is nothing more than the behavior of a bunch of nerve cells. That's what he says, And when I read that, I have to think, how does he look at his wife? How does he look at his children? How does he look at his grandchildren? Is this really true, or is this just something he says because it follows logically from his atheism? But and I'll bet it's not really true. I'll bet it follows logically. He writes books, he preaches about it, but when the grandkids come over for the day, he doesn't believe it.
Right.
And
yeah.
sort of the truth of his creation in the image of God and their creation in the image of God just overrides his philosophy.
Yeah, so you
Which is kind of like the illustration I gave you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say it reminds me of the illustration that I gave you a couple of times ago of the tension that the atheist lives in. It's like a guy who teaches that gravity doesn't exist, and he's become this very famous lecturer, and he travels all over the world preaching on the non-existence of gravity, and yet every step he takes across the platform is proving his theory wrong. And then when he goes to the platform, the fact that he doesn't glue his notes to the surface of the podium, argues against his thesis, and the fact he doesn't chain himself to the floor and all that. So that's how I see it. The fact that this guy, he says that human beings have no value, but the grandkids come over, and he believes, down to his bones that they have special, high, and equal value. And so he's sort of living like a Christian, even though he's denying it verbally.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. So if someone, let's say, listening to the program has a friend or a relative or acquaintance who's a non-believer, so that would be one of the things that they should start asking questions about is how do you ground this innate understanding that human people have intrinsic value? Yes, and
to get back to the quotation that I read at the beginning from John Searle, the atheist philosopher of mind, where he says that this is the most important problem in philosophy is how do we fit in. What I'd like to emphasize is this is just one aspect. We've looked at human worth, one aspect, and we've seen that we don't fit. It doesn't fit. You cannot justify a belief in inherent worth, high worth, equal worth, based on atheism. But in the coming months, when you and I continue to talk, we're going to get into morality, we're going to get into the meaning of life, we're going to get into free will, we're going to get into the mind and our thoughts, our self-consciousness, our sense of self. And what I'm going to try and show is that none of them can be justified. All of these aspects of who we are and that we basically take for granted, just like we take for granted the value of human life, none of it can be justified. So, but that's for future conversations.
Yeah, I can't wait. And Ken, how can people get a hold of your material?
Well, if you want to go to the Coming Home Network website, this is the simplest thing. If you want to go to the Coming Home Network website, you can look on the various topics pages. And for instance, this series of lessons is there on the God page. So at the Coming Home Network website, where I work, if people want to order recorded talks that I've given, then they should go to KennethHensley.com, KennethHensley.com. And just look on the store page, and they're all available there as MP3 downloads. Excellent.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This is a great program.
Okay, we're going to talk again next month, I take it. We'll set a time and do it.
Absolutely, my friend. All right, take care.
Okay, thank you, Gary.
And that is Kenneth Hensley. Yeah, lots of great stuff to come. I love his work. Check out the Coming Home Network page. Of course, there's all sorts of great resources, but he has a series of articles, folks, that I think would be invaluable for those talking to non-believers. Tomorrow's program, the fun continues. We're going to have Joseph Pierce into the dojo. You may be familiar with many of his books. He's going to explain his conversion story and his race with the devil, his autobiography. It's going to be gripping. Then Friday, Father Collins comes into the dojo right here in the Midwest Command Center, and we're going to talk about spiritual apologetics, I guess you could say. It's going to be lots of fun. All right, folks, coming up next, the dynamic duo of Catholic Talk Radio, Terry and Jesse Show. The show starting it all. It's time for me to turn off the dojo lights here. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.